Today we are announcing Operation P.I.E. That's Operation Prevention, Intervention, and Enforcement. As you know, Operation Ceasefire began a couple weeks ago, and that is the enforcement piece of this initiative. However, we have reached out to the pastors because one of the things that we know in fighting violent crime in our community is we have to attack the culture of violence and drugs in our community. And I want to introduce the pastors who are here with us today that have helped bring this operation forward. And first we have Bishop John Guns is here with us from St. Paul's Missionary Baptist Church. If y'all would raise your hand and so they'll know who we have with us. Pastor Ardell Jones is from Life at the River International. We thank him for being here. Pastor Willie Singleton, another Level Empowerment Center. Thank you for being here. Also Pastor Jeff Johnson from New Revelation Missionary Baptist Church. Also Pastor Eugene Diamond from Abyssinia Baptist Church. Also Pastor Jeff Rumlin from Day Springs Baptist Church. Also Pastor Juan Walker from Encouraging Word Church. And Pastor Lee Thomas from Open Arms Christian Fellowship. And the other pastors that we're reaching out to and have reached out to that will couldn't be here today but will be here working with us in the future. This mission is really about prevention and intervention. It's about our at-risk kids, and it's also about our prolific offenders. And we have a two-pronged approach working with the pastors. We're going to identify individuals that are at risk and who are prolific offenders, and we have criteria that we've developed to establish that. And just to give you an example of our at-risk youth, these are ages 10 to 15 years old that we have targeted. Now, to validate our criteria for this population, we actually went back to 2005 and looked at individuals who were 10 to 15 years old in 2005, carried them up to 2009, and looked at those 10 to 15-year-olds to see where they're at today. So if we had used this criteria back in 2005 to identify this population, where are they today? I can tell you 96 of them, of the top 1,000, 96 of them are in jail currently. 763 of them have been arrested and rearrested. 127 are in prison, and 14 are dead. So we think we have some pretty good criteria for determining who is at risk. And so we will identify the top 50 at risk, and the top 50 prolific offenders. And then we'll be developing a message that will counter the drug culture, the violence culture, and the gang culture, and go into these communities working with the pastors to deliver that message. So the message is fighting back this violence, gang, message culture that's out there, plus moving forward with the messengers being the police and the pastors that you see here, plus others that will be joining us. And then in addition to that, we are developing methods. So we have a message, we have the messengers, and we are continuing to develop methods that we will use to get the message out and to hopefully provide some prevention and intervention for our at-risk youth and our prolific offenders. Part of the methods are the meetings that we've had so far in the community and others. But to talk about that with Operation Save Our Sons, Bishop John Guns is here with us, and I'm going to ask the bishop to come up and say a word about Operation Save Our Sons and this initiative. Bishop.
First, I want to express publicly my appreciation to our sheriff and to Jacksonville Sheriff's Department office for the work that they are doing, and for his unique passion for this. We have come together as pastors, and there are several others who are not a part of this initial meeting but have verbally committed. But we have come together to create just that, a partnership. We believe very strongly that in order for our communities to be transformed and for our young men and young women to be saved in every conceivable way, the partnership between churches, between government, between JSO, between the school district must occur. As the founder and present chair of Operation Save Our Sons, our commitment and our relationship with sheriff, with our sheriff and with JSO is well documented and very strong. Transcending just Operation Save Our Sons, however, are all of these pastors and all of these different churches who take seriously the work. And so you will see a number of things coming out of this. We are very serious about changing those numbers that we just heard. And our sheriff is providing leadership in that, and we're grateful for that. And so I'm going to now ask Bishop Destin Leoffer Thomas to just come say a word, and then of course Pastor Eugene Diamond will come and will announce the first initiative out of this operation as relates to a partnership with our sheriff and JSO.
I want to thank the sheriff and Dr. Guns, Bishop Guns, for this opportunity. We are very strategically passionate about helping to assist and to transform our communities in all sectors of the city, not just one, but we have these pastors here today, and so we have partnered along with the initiative that has been brought to us to make sure that we bring forth change, not just the pastors, but incorporating our congregations as well. The African proverb says it takes a whole village to raise a child. We are at a critical point in our city, across this nation, and we're hoping that from this effort, great things will be brought out of it in the days to come. I want to thank you again, and hoping that what we are about to do will bring about a model for our country, a model for the areas in our city that we can save a generation.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank the sheriff and all of the clergy and pastors who are here, and all of those zone commanders who will be working with us. We want to announce that the first community meeting will be held at Abyssinia Missionary Baptist Church. It's our North Campus, 10325 Interstate Center Drive. We'll be there on May the 28th at 6:30. This is where the community and the officers and all of the clergy will come together, and we are inviting the community and especially all of our young folk to come. And this is not the first one, this will be the second one, and we want our young folk to be able to not only ask the officers questions, but to interact and to learn the officers who will be in their community. We've partnered together to make a difference, and it takes all of us, as Pastor Thomas has said, and so we're looking forward to it again. That's Thursday night, May the 28th at 6:30 at the Abyssinia Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Pastor Diamond. And look, I have to say, we know that if we're going to change the gang culture and the drug culture in some of our neighborhoods, we have absolutely got to start addressing it at a very personal level with those individuals. The prolific offenders, if you'll think about it this way, the prolific offenders are those who are already involved in gangs. The at-risk youth are not in gangs. They're 10 to 15, they're not in gangs yet. But we know because of that criteria that they likely will be, and they will either wind up in prison or dead or arrested over and over again. And so that's why we're focusing on them. They are the ones, the at-risk youth, are the ones that are going to be recruited by the prolific offenders to move into these gangs and these drug cartels, if you will, that are operating in our neighborhoods. And we have officers that are going to partner with pastors, and we're going to go out and try to change the culture in Jacksonville. So, pastors, I thank each and every one of you for being here, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in the future. And now we'll throw it open for questions.
Stephanie Brown at WOKB. So one part of this, you said we're identifying 50 at-risk and 50
Prolific offenders.
Prolific offenders. Right. How do you convince, especially the prolific offenders, to want to come to the table and want to be a part of finding another path?
Yeah, well, Pastor, did you answer?
No, I'm not.
Oh, I thought you wanted to answer that. I'm going to let you answer. Well, I think that's where the pastors become important, is addressing not just the individual, but the family. Because it is a cultural change that needs to take place. It's not, arrest, I've said it a million times, we cannot arrest our way out of, a murder problem, a violence problem. We have to start changing hearts. And nobody can do that better than these gentlemen sitting up here.
We know just a few weeks ago, we were briefed about, some of the recent gang activity, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people involved in gangs. Identifying 50 and 50 here, is that enough to really make a dent on the problem that we have?
Well, we've talked about that this morning, and in fact, we know that it's scalable. We have as many pastors as we can get to come out with us. We will partner up, and hopefully that number will obviously grow as far as the outreach. But that's where we're starting.
Sheriff, operationally, how do you see this thing happening? Identifying someone in the street and uniting pastors with families, kind of trying to where the rubber meets the road.
Right, and the officers from that neighborhood, where those prolific offenders or at-risk children live, the officers from that neighborhood are going to be part of that meeting. They are actually there to establish a relationship with that family. And look, I want to tell, particularly these at-risk youth, I want to tell that parent, that share these numbers, that 127 are in prison. I want to tell that youth, look, you're liable to be in prison or dead if you continue, if there's not some intervention in your life. And we want it to be a positive intervention, not an arrest. We want to wrap services around these folks, and that's really what the officer is going to be there for. May not be a law enforcement problem that this child has, but a lot of other issues that may not be a law enforcement responsibility, but you know what? We can be a catalyst for that change, helping that family.
Sheriff Lesh?
Who will determine who are the at-risk kids, the prolific offenders? I mean, not all those kids are going to go to a pastor, so how are you going to determine that?
So we're going to them. We have criteria, and I'm not going to put that out, but we have criteria that we have used, and we validated that criteria by looking at 2005 to 2009 and looking at that 10 to 15-year-old group, and all these horrific things occurred to that group. So what we're going to do is identify the current 10 to 15-year-olds who are, based on this criteria, are on this list, and it's weighted, so it's from number 1 down to wherever it goes, and we will start with the top 50. Like I said, it's scalable, but we're going to start with the top 50. We're going to partner an officer with a pastor, and we're going to go talk to that family and try to really intervene in a positive way in their life and stop these numbers from reoccurring in that population.
Can you tell me the difference between a child that's at risk and a prolific offender?
Yes, prolific offenders are gang members. They are people who have been arrested multiple times for serious crimes. The at-risk are not.
So they're just everyday kids?
No, they are children who are at risk. For example, I'll give you a couple criteria. For example, if they have witnessed a murder, if they have witnessed a rape, if they have witnessed an aggravated battery, there's a likelihood, because they've been exposed to this violence, there's a very good likelihood where they're going. That's some of their criteria.
Sheriff, how different is this new plan as opposed to when you first started out last year with Operation Ceasefire? And then twofold, is the surveillance camera method going to be used this time around as well?
Yes, that's all part of the enforcement piece. Operation Ceasefire is really the enforcement piece of this. Look, we're still going after prolific offenders to put them in jail, those that have committed crimes. So that's not going to change.
So this is more of a social approach and hitting it from the root?
Yes, this is more the prevention and intervention piece. That's why we're calling it Operation P.I.E. Prevention, intervention, and enforcement. And ceasefire is just a piece of that.
Knowing that the original ceasefire was just about a year ago, we scaled it back and had to flare it back up again just about a year later.
Right.
Is this intervention enforcement piece potentially something that's going to prevent us from having the same conversation another year down the road?
Well, I would certainly hope so. You know, the problem is when we had the resources, we could address this all over the city and not just one section of the city. You know, if you remember when we kicked off Operation Safe Streets last spring, I told the city council people, you know, that look, some of you are Peter and some of you are Paul, because we're going to steal people from Peter to pay Paul. And we had to do that. Then once we had, I think it was over a 50% reduction in violent crime in those neighborhoods, we sent officers back to the areas that they came from because they were needed there as well. That's the impact of 147 officers having been cut. The 91 community service officers having been cut. You know, in addition to the 91 community service officers, and the impact that they had as far as a force multiplier for the guys with the guns and the badges, going out and being, you know, an administrative handler so that police officers with guns and badges didn't have to perform those functions. In addition to that, many of these folks of those community service officers were actually role models in the community for these youth who looked up to them. And that, it's terrible that we lost that. Many of them from our most challenged neighborhoods. And they were truly role models, showing that there was a way out of the cycle that many of them felt they were stuck in.
The enforcement efforts right now focused mostly in the high crime areas like Northwest Jacksonville. Is that the idea with the prevention and intervention as well, to stay in those high crime corridors?
Yes, the enforcement piece of Operation P.I.E. is still going to continue to focus on the hot spots, the prolific offenders particularly, because we know they're committing most of the crime. And we're going after those guys. And we're going after the guns. Operation See It, Say It, Stop It. You know, the gun bounty program is back. Actually, it never went anywhere, but we want to start beating that drum again with the community so that they know they can get a huge reward. You tell me who's carrying a gun illegally, and we make that arrest and we recover that gun, you get, well, now it's up to $3,000 if there's also a crime involved. So we want these folks to know that those, you know, that those rewards are out there.
Sheriff, I got Pastor Guns a question. As a minister who's going to be meeting with these kids and the other ministers as well, what do you say to the parents? What do you say to the kids to say, hey, change your direction?
Well, you know, it's interesting as we sat in the meeting as I've been listening to our sheriff, you know, respond to the questions. I think what we bring to the table uniquely, because the first thing that we all agreed that this is apolitical. This is not a political agenda. This is not about party affiliation. All of us represent uniquely a community, a church, families, and we represent these young men particularly. I believe that the sheriff partnering with us allows us to communicate the message that ultimately begins to diminish crime activity by changing values and character. At the end of the day, and the sheriff said it very passionately, he has never sat across the table from someone who committed a murder and thought, you know, what's in their heart. He understood that there was something that had gone wrong. And I think that what we represent is something that transcends what normally kind of divides our community. all of us have decided, with the leadership of JSO and our sheriff, that these young people are worth saving. So that's the first message. And Pastor Diamond is going to be leading a group of pastors along with some of the administrative leadership of JSO to frame that message in a very creative and very real way. Will every young person change? No. Will every family invite us in? No. But I bet you there's going to be a whole lot more who invite us in than tell us don't come. And I would even encourage you to follow the process. You will be amazed at what's going to happen in this.
Pastor Guns, we've had this conversation many times. Is this it? Is this the key? You know, to get something different, you know, you have to do something different. Is this it? Is this the answer? You know, we talk about different initiatives. Do y'all believe that this is the effective one?
I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm saying it's going to answer some questions. There are a number of issues and factors, you know, as we sat in this meeting. And again, it was a very open-ended conversation today, which was amazing. You know, joblessness. Pastor Diamond talked about hopelessness. Pastor Thomas talked about family issues. All of us understand that there's some very real challenges. Pastor Johnson talked about the fact that we need to change the exposure level of these children because their role models are the ones who are engaging in crime over and over and over again. We can never think that there shouldn't be arrests, but we also believe that before there are arrests, there needs to be mentorship and relationships. So is this the answer? No, it's a part of the solution. And I think one of the great things is that we have a sheriff and pastors who have decided to transcend whatever the boundaries and perceptions have been to begin to develop a healthy partnership for the sake of our sons.
Pastor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying that this partnership is going to open some doors that have been closed to families.
You have said it better than I would have, sir. Thank you so very much. That's why you make the big money. That's right. That's
You
why.
do the heavy lifting, Pastor.
Yeah. Well, I am heavy and I'm still lifting it, so I appreciate that too. But seriously, I think at the end of this, and I'll say this, the reason I'm in is because if young people know we care, they will trust us. These men are an expression of care. These officers are an expression of care. We're trying to change perception. Perception only changes with intimate relationships. You don't change a person's view of you if they don't ever get to know you. So we're changing perception. And I promise you, this is going to work. It's going to transcend this amazing man's tenure as sheriff. It's going to transcend our tenure as pastor. It's going to even transcend your employment for the station. Because years from now, there will be young people with family and children who will say, this preacher and this policeman came by my house, and I will never be the same again. We will never see all of the evidence, but we're not supposed to. We're simply supposed to start it. And if we start it, God will give us grace to have victory and success.
Amen.
Now the offering.
Great job. No, that was, and look, that's why what we're focusing on here is the message, the messengers, and the methods. And on that message, I can't tell you how important I believe it is that these, particularly the at-risk youth, understand that they are valuable. We were at the meeting at Bethel Baptist, the community forum, and who was the young man at the end of the table that said, I felt like nothing. T1. T1 said, I felt like nothing. The community made me feel like nothing, so I acted like nothing. Buddy, that's powerful. When he said that, it shook me. Because somebody that feels like nothing and can act like that, they can do anything. And that's why the message is so important. But that's not a message I think that we can carry alone. That's why we need the pastors to carry that message with us. And that's why I think this partnership is going to be so very important to changing some of these lives and the outcomes for their lives. All righty?
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all very much. God bless.